Welcome to the UPoker Academy Poker Lecture Series, designed to make you a better poker player. This game we're going to be looking at a heads-up sit-and-go. Now this is kind of my specialty. I played heads-up sit-and-goes professionally for 3 years, but this is my main game. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the strategy. If you've watched the earlier lectures in this series, you'll know that our basic strategy is to raise any 2 cards on the button for 2 times the big blind. So we've done that. And we have a flop that's a great c-bet, even if we don't have the flush draw. This time we have the flush draw, so it's definitely a c-bet. Here, we have the option to bet or to check. Now, it's better to check here because we don't want to risk the check raise. And he could check raise us if he has a jack. Of course, we're not going to bluff anything out that beats us, so we're not going to bluff a 5 out, we're not going to bluff a 4 out. But we might bluff out a hand that's weaker than us, like a weaker flush draw. So now we have the option to call or to fold. I don't know anything about this opponent. I assume he called on the flop with something. He could have called with a flush draw, 5, or a jack. I don't think he called with a flush draw often enough to make this a profitable call, so I'm going to fold. He most likely has a jack there. And that's how you play heads-up poker. So we've got King 4 out of position. Notice he didn't raise his button. That's something you take note of. It can change your entire strategy depending on how often they raise their button. So with the King 2, the 6-2-6 with the King 4, we're not going to bet the flop. We will bet this turn. He didn't bet the flop, so it's unlikely he has a 6. Now that he's raised, this is not the point where we want to get involved. He could have a flush. He could have just made a flush. He could have had a 6 all along. So better just get rid of the 4. He might have had 3-5. That's probably not as likely as maybe having a 4, having a 6. But in any case, we just put 200 in, not the time to get involved. If he is raising us as a bluff, we're going to make a lot of money if he does it a couple more times, because we're going to figure it out that he's got a bluff when he raises. We're going to re-raise him back. So we've got the gut shot here. A jack will give us the best hand. It's not worth betting. Again, not worth betting. No weaker hands are going to call us. But now that he's checked the river, we might can fire out 100, a 9, a 10, or a queen could call. In this case, or an ace even. In this case, a 9 does. He did have the 2 on the river, so we're lucky he didn't raise us there. Of course, he thought we had the jack, so we couldn't raise us. In any case, we lost the bare minimum there. So we've raised our 9-8, 2 times the big blind. That's the reason that we raise, because if he folds the button, if he folds the big blind, then we make an instant profit. If he doesn't, we have the option to c-bet, to play out the hand, and we make a profit down the line. So we're always raising our buttons when we're in the small blind and he's in the big blind, simply because of the instant profit opportunity. So you notice he insta-checked there. I think I'm going to go in and bet here. He might have had a 2 or a 3, but in either case he instant checked, which means he probably didn't have a hand. And we're going to go in and bet and take that pot down. He might have had a better hand than us. He may have had a king high. He may have had a 2 or a 3. But by betting, we blow him off those hands. So we just throw out a min bet, and that's the end of the hand. So again, he's not raising his buttons. He really should be raising these. This is a great edge for us. Now that we know this, we're going to really start manipulating him later in the game, and I'll show you exactly how. What this means, though, for right now, for the dynamic is, imagine you have 2 players who are always raising their buttons. That's break even. Nobody wins any money. You just trade back and forth. But when one player, like me, raises all their buttons and one player never raises theirs, they're not putting me on a decision pre-flop, and I'm putting them on one. So that's a net positive for me, because I'm always making money when I'm raising. So the simple fact that he never raises his buttons, he's just raised one, so we're definitely going to fold. Simple fact that he rarely, or not 100%, raises his buttons is an edge. We're going to continue playing this player so long as he's not really, really good post-flop, because he's giving up so much edge, and he's giving up that edge every single hand. So here, this is a definite c-bet. He most likely doesn't have a king or a queen. We have the jack. He's betting to us, not the time to get involved once again. A bet there could be a king, which we're drawing very, very slim against, maybe 7 outs, but he's bet half pot. Bet full pot. If he'd bet half pot, we might have gotten involved there. So the Jack 10 is a very playable hand. We can often raise this, but given that he doesn't often raise his buttons, he might be limping strong hands there. It's too early to tell. So we have the option to bet this jack or check it. He could call us with a weaker jack, so we're going to bet it. And he's min raised us. This is a huge leak. We're going to call this with any two cards 100% of the time. He's just built the pot for us when we're in position, and he didn't ask us to fold at all. So that's a really bad mistake on his part. We've hit the straight draw. A queen will give us the best hand, so we'll have 7. He's bet 2/3 pot. He's got 4,000 behind, so we're getting about 1 to 6 on this call. So we are going to call. That call also has some value as a float. You don't know what he's betting, so he might check here, and if he does, we are going to go in and fire back. He might have bet there with 6-7, so he's raised us, and this is going to be the time when we get off our hand. Even though we're getting 1 to 4 there, we need much better odds with the flush out. So, you know, it's a good place to bet there, but he might still be raising his bluff, and we're going to have to figure that out when we go forward and play with him some more. So we've got the 6 here. We're running a little bit short on chips, so we are going to have to bet out here. And we've just hit a great card on the turn for us, so we're going to bet out one more time. And he's called, and we're finally going to go all in on the river. Now that queen doesn't help us, but it doesn't hurt us too much. If he had us beat, he had us beat. If not, yeah, he had us beat because he caught the lucky card. That happens a lot in heads up. Let me see if I can get this guy to play with me one more time. Alright, so we did get a rematch. Let's talk about that last hand for a second. We went on and went all in on that river because he could have had a 6 when he called on the flop, and he would have called the river. And we only had 800 chips in a 2,000 chip pot, so we were more than pot committed on that river. We were going to get it all in. And when the queen came, we really didn't have anything to do because we still had the 10. You know, we might have been beating a 6 still. At the end of the day, he got lucky to catch that second queen on the river. He had 5 outs. He caught one of them. It happens sometimes. Other times we double back up. So let's talk about what we learned from the first match. He's not raising his buttons enough. So how we're going to exploit that later is when we're going to try to let the stacks get shallow relative to the blinds. So we're going to let the blinds go up. The higher the blinds are when he makes that mistake, the bigger of a mistake it is. So we're going to try to play a little bit slower this game. Second mistake is he's raising us a lot. I don't think he could always be raising us with a hand. He might have run really good and had a bunch of hands that he could justify raising us with, but he might be raising as a bluff. So we're going to stop betting so loosely with weak hands. What that's going to do is if he's got a better hand than us and we bet a second best hand, he's not going to get to check raise us off our hand. It's also going to let us improve to the best hand if we've got a second best hand, because we're not getting raised off our hand. We might catch 2 pair of trips. And finally, it's going to induce bluffs on the river. So when we check the turn and he bets into us on the river, because we know he's betting as a bluff, he's more likely to do that. So checking instead of betting your middling hands actually is the correct way to exploit somebody who's making this mistake of being too aggressive and making too many raises as bluffs. So those are the changes we're going to make, and let's see how they change this game. Note that we're still going to play strong hands strongly. When a player is raising as a bluff, that makes our strong hands go way up in value. So we're still going to be raising every hand pre-flop because we want to have a chance to hit the strong hand. And because he hasn't been making too many re-raises pre-flop, there's no reason to stop that. And the fact that he limps his button makes our raise pre-flop that much more valuable. So here, we've got top pair. It's a little bit better than a middling hand, so we are going to go in and bet it. And nothing scary about the 8. We're going to go and bet one more time. We expect to raise at some point as a bluff. So we are going to bet one more time. And if he raises, we're going to call. So that's how you play against somebody who's raising as a bluff. So we did the exact right thing there. We bet 3 streets. He probably had a jack. He probably was drawing something, and he didn't catch it. So we've got the king 9 we raised, we've got the gut shot. We're going to be c-betting a lot of flops anyway. It's best if we have some kind of draw when we c-bet. We have the kings and we have the jacks to give us the best hand. Here we're going to check. We're going to hope to improve to the best hand. We don't in this case. We expect a bet to come out. It doesn't, so we're going to check it down and hope to see a jack 9. An 8-9, he did river something. He is allowed to do that, but he was drawing to he was drawing to the second nuts. If the jack had come, or the third nuts even, if the jack had come, we would have stacked him, because he was looking for that jack to make a straight. So no reason to bluff. This is extremely connected. He's going to have a hand here more often than not. So we are going to go and c-bet here. We have 5 outs by my calculations. That's 3 outs for the kings and 2 for the backdoor flush, which could come. In this case, it doesn't come. We still might have some outs. He didn't check raise. He might not have the jack. Might have 6 outs. We're going to go in and check again. And we're just going to check it down. He did have the 3, so he's calling with bottom pair on our c-bets, which is fine. It's not an awful play, especially against somebody who c-bets as frequently as I do. But it is going to make our check behind the turn strategy more effective because we're going to have that extra card. But on the other hand, what we're going to need to do is test whether or not he's folding to double barrels with bottom pair. So how we're going to do that is we're going to pick up a hand like top pair, and we're going to fire twice. So like we said, with a weak hand or with a middling hand, we're going to check that turn. When we have a strong hand, like a top pair with a good kicker, we're going to fire twice and see if he folds. If he does, he's probably calling pretty weakly. So we are going to go into c-bet. We don't have any reason not to c-bet yet. We only have to win that c-bet 1 in 3 times for it to be profitable. This is one of those flops you can check or you can bet. He did limp, so it's unlikely he has an ace. So now we are going to bet, even though the 10 makes it a little bit more connected. That's what we were afraid of when we bet, is getting that bluff raise. So we are going to fold here, and we're going to consider in the future not making that bluff bet there on the turn. So again, we're going to fire out here. This is a fine place to c-bet. They're going to fold this flop a lot of times. Very rare they have an 8 when there are 2 already out there. And because we're heads up, you only have to beat 2 cards, just one opponent, not an entire table of opponents. So the ace-5, not strong enough to raise his limp. Definitely not a flop we're going to play on. He likely has all kinds of draws or pairs here, so we are just going to check and fold a few bets. In this case, he did have the draw, but it didn't come in, so we do take it down. Ace-7 is a great hand to raise. We're hoping for a top pair for a 7 or even better an ace. This is a very wet flop, so instead of betting here, we're going to check. We have showdown value with the ace. If we had something like 5-6 here, we would go in and bet. But with the ace's showdown value, a flop like this is better checked. We do need to go in and bet this turn. We have the 7. If he raises us, I think we have to call. So this time he opted not to raise, he just folded. But with the 7 there, we have some good equity against whatever hand he had. And again, we might want to think about whether or not we want to call a raise there, because he could easily be sandbagging with a queen or a 10. So here we're going to go in and bet out. We bet out on lots of these connected flops, and this time we actually have something, so we have to bet out just to keep our image straight. And here's another min re-raise. We're not scared of that at all. We're just going to call it with any 2 cards. Here we've got second pair. It's a reasonably good hand. We've got the king is outs if he's got the jack, or if he's got pocket aces, or if he's got queens. I think he's probably got something like 7-8 though. So I'm going to go in and call there. He could easily have the jack queen. He might have hit the ace. He's checked. We're going to check because we don't want to risk the re-raise. And we are going to check it down. So we did have king 8, so not 7-8, but a very bad hand to min 3-bet with. Now that we know what he's min 3-betting with, if it's that weak, we're going to be able to jam over him a lot of times. So we're going to remember that. That's a really good read to have. because he's not going to be able to call an all-in with a king 8. So nothing worth betting here. We just got the bottom pair. Best to check it down and hope we have the best hand. Definitely not going to put any money in though. So a7 a great hand. We hope to get min 3-bet here, because then we're going to go all in on him. Notice stacks are getting shorter. We're now at about 11 big blinds. So pretty soon we're going to be moving into push fold poker. I think now is going to be the time to do it. If you're not familiar with it, let me introduce you to the Nash Equilibrium. This is on riskoriented.com under the Better Than Nash Shoving Equilibriums. And what it does is shows you when you should push hands. So here we had king 10. This is going to be a push under 20 big blinds. We had 10 big blinds and we pushed and we took it down. That only works when you're in the small blind. When you're in the big blind and he calls, you have to be a little bit more careful, but ace-6 is such a strong hand that we are just going to go in and jam it. So here we've got 6-8 suited. The suiteds are over here. We've got 8-6. This is a push under 10 big blinds. We do have under 10 big blinds, so we are going to push it. We get called by 7 king, but even against 7 king, we have outs. We can catch the 6 or the 8 and win the game. This time he doubled up. Of course, 35% of the time he loses the game right there. So now we get to start back over and we get to play again. I think this is going to be a good time to just bet out. It's unlikely that he has any of these cards. They're very high. And we do have outs if he calls. We've got the queens. So we're about to be under 10 big blinds again. So we're going to move back to our Nash Equilibrium chart. 2-9 out of position is just going to be a check and a fold. No, I don't like the 10. If that had been a 4 or something, I think I would have bet there. And we're just going to check this down. He's got us beat. He probably would have folded the jack high, but you never know if he's got a jack high or a queen there, or a king. So here jack 10 is, if we check the Nash Equilibrium chart, it's going to be a clear shove. In fact, jack 10 is going to be a shove under 15 big blinds. And he did call us with queen 8, and we did stack him. So that's how you win a heads-up sit and go. It may look like just luck, but there's in fact a lot of math that goes into that jamming equilibrium. A lot of times he folds and we take down the pot, and when he does call, we're 40-50% to win anyway. So let me see if I can get him for another game. Alright, looks like he's going to decline our rematch, so that's going to end our heads-up video. I hope you've learned a little bit about heads-up sit and goes and how you can simply manipulate an opponent's playing style to earn yourself a mathematical edge. And we talked a little bit about playing under 10-15 big blinds with the Nash Equilibriums. Now, if you Google Nash Equilibrium, you're going to find a different chart than the one that I just showed you. What I showed you was something I calculated that I'm calling the Better Than Nash Equilibriums. It's a little bit looser than the Nash Equilibriums, and the reason is we did some math on actual player ranges, not just according to some mathematical formula that says, you know, 2 players playing perfectly, this is what you should push. No, we use actual players' tendencies to build those charts. So they're a little bit more accurate than the ones you might find on Google. In fact, our charts are like the 3rd or the 4th result on Google, depending on what country you're Googling from, actually. But if you go to riskoriented.com and you click on Poker Tools in the menu bar and you go down to the Nash Equilibrium charts, you can get access to those right now. And there's a bunch of charts on there. There's some that'll show you exactly how to play at different blind levels, but I tend to just use the top chart where the opponent calls with 30% of their hands. So thank you for joining us at UPoker Academy. Please check us out on riskoriented.com. For more poker strategy delivered directly to your YouTube account, please like us and subscribe to us. And for more poker strategy right now, continue on to our next poker lecture by clicking here.